as well.
I had it.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Małgorzata Bonikowska, the Center for International Relations. Welcome to our series for young people, students, and for all those who are interested in other countries. Diplomatic Coffee. With Diplomatic Coffee, we meet the ambassadors of different countries and we talk about these countries and the and in Europe. Today, we will talk about Canada. Welcome, Leslie Scanlon. Your Excellency, thank you very much for being with us, the Ambassador of Canada.
Hello.
Yes, Leslie is a very experienced diplomat in the service 2 decades. She's also, very experienced in working abroad. She speaks Japanese, she speaks Spanish. She was working in the embassies of Canada in Japan, in France, and now Poland. She is a very, very dedicated cyclist. She made a trip on bicycle from Warsaw to Gdansk. So imagine 4 days. And well, welcome. I'm very happy to have you here.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So we would like to discuss a little bit today Canada itself. Of course, people in Poland would know Canada, would know something about Canada, but maybe not much. We have a Polish diaspora there, especially in the Toronto region and Ottawa. But the perception of Canada in Poland is mainly nature, beautiful landscapes, good healthcare system, social security, easy life. What do you Canadians think about yourself? How would you, describe Canada?
Oh, I think we would see ourselves as an open nation, very welcoming. I obviously all the aspects of a modern country. We have a robust economy. We have, a very robust scientific research sector, all of those good things we have. But I think we're a friendly and welcoming society. We're based on immigration, as you know, so it's a very multicultural place. And that is really the basis of who we are, I think, because at the very beginning, we were formed as a nation of immigrants and refugees. So everywhere you go, it's lots of languages, lots of colors of skin. So we're a very multicolor, multicultural place. I think that would be something I'd say. And then there's all of the stuff about nature and all that it's certainly a perception everybody around the world has of Canada.
And everybody would, associate North America with the United States, of course. So Canada is in the second place normally, especially for the Polish people who are very much, connected with the USA. Many people have families there. It's around 10 million Poles or people of Polish origin living in the United States. How would you describe the difference, Canadians and the Americans, your, let's say, neighbor country, also the first point of reference, I guess, for Canadians?
Well, for Canada, we have about 1 million Polish Canadians. We're in a population of about 38 million, just like Poland. We have a similar population size, but we're obviously a much bigger country, so we have lots of empty space. Our relationship with the United States is very complex. The majority of Canadians live along the southern border, which is the border with the United States. It is the longest undefended border in the world. Canada and US have very close ties, moving back and forth with each other's very important trading partners. As a society, there are obviously similarities and differences. And in 1992, when I was leaving Canada to go to my posting in Tokyo, I drove across the United States for the first time. And I was actually really surprised how different it was. Everything was different. As soon as you cross the border.
What is so different?
Things like you cross the border and you say thank you to say, you buy something in a store and you say thank you. And they go, uh-huh. And this was all the way across the States. And I thought, wow, that's so strange. And it's a beautiful country. It's obviously also, like Canada, very multicultural. It's very politically polarized right now, like many places. But that's over time. Canada, US, we're an incredibly close neighbors. Yeah.
Right. Well, of course, we would put Canada and the US in a different perspective because those people who are connected with Poles living in these countries could also compare, Canada is associated here in Poland with much better social security system, healthcare system, which works, which gives a kind of a security that in case there is a problem, there is also a rescue for that. But can you tell us also, Canadians, how would you like to how you present Canada in Poland. What would you like us to know about your country, except for the things you already mentioned?
Well, because of my position as ambassador, my objective here is to obviously advocate for Canadian positions on any possible issue you can imagine, and to present. My job is to explain Poland to Canada and to the government of Canada, especially. But while I'm here, I'm obviously promoting Canadian values, and so how would I present? We're a modern. I mean, really, what would I add to what I've already said? I think that we'd want to be considered more than just a nice destination for a holiday. And there's a lot of investment back and forth, and obviously we spoke a couple minutes ago about free trade, but Canada is a trading nation, and Poland is our most important trading partner in Eastern Central Europe. So for us, there's if you're in business in Poland, you're aware of Canada and the business specialties we have.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, because it's also not so well known. We've just had this new agreement, CETA, which helps not only the Polish companies but the European companies to deal with Canadian businesses. It's the European Canadian Free Trade Agreement, we can say
Yeah.
so. And how do you think it really works well in practice? Do you see any change once we got this agreement signed?
Absolutely. It went into provisional application in September 2017. And for the first 2 years it ran, there was a demonstrable increase in two-way trade. Last year, because of COVID, economies around the world have obviously suffered. But I think the proof is completely obvious for everyone to see that CETA is a benefit both to Poland and Canada. It's more beneficial to Poland. In fact, the statistics are showing a bigger advantage to Poland, but it means 98% tariff removal. Sorry, I
Oh.
should say no tariffs on 98% of the products that we trade back and forth. It's just an incredible advantage to both countries.
And what is really kind of a trade between us? What Poland sells and what Canada sells here, and what are the products?
Well, let me say that the first thing I'll say is that last week or the week before, there was a big announcement that Northland had invested with Orlen in offshore wind generation off the Baltic coast up northern Poland, which is a huge investment for Canada and a very welcome investment for Orlen and for Poland, as Poland tries to focus more on green energy. But obviously the popular products here in Poland from Canada that people would know about would be maple syrup, McCain French fries. It's a good Eastern Canadian company that's been in Poland since about 1990 in the Wrocław area, where they produce frozen potatoes for French fries. Bombardier, so lots of train rail cars and subway cars and things like that. Circle K is a convenience chain you might be aware of. There are 360 of them in Poland. That's a Canadian company.
Petrol, yeah, petrol stations.
Well, yeah, and it's the little shop that goes with the petrol station. But there's CGI, which is a leading IT company, and obviously Poland is well known for high tech. So is Canada. But the most recent one, I mean, we do a lot of clean tech. That's one of our big priorities. But I think Northland's investment in the offshore wind generation is really huge, and it's very good. It's very on message for Canada, and I think as Poland tries to move towards green energy and renewable energy, these are very good investments for us to both partner in.
Right. And tell me, I've heard that also the especially Polish products, Polish agriculture products are also sold in Canada. And we had issue around CETA because there was an issue discussed about the quality of these products. Europe was hesitating, was having doubts about importing products from Northern America, because also Canada is in NAFTA agreement with the United States. Could you explain this a little bit, how this was resolved, and what products are of the trade between Poland and Canada? I'm talking about mostly Polish product in Canada.
Yeah, that's less of interest to me is what goes to Canada from Poland in the sense of the work I do. But there are obviously products like apples or high tech products going into Canada. But some of the issues that you're talking about reflect things like GMO, and they were in fact. These are misunderstood, and the challenge there is, like I said earlier, about Poland explaining or promoting itself so people have a real understanding of the beautiful country Poland is and how cosmopolitan Warsaw is, etc. For Canada, there was a challenge associated with GMO and trying to explain, if your product is getting into the EU, it's because it's passed every possible environmental criteria. You're not getting anything but the best quality product because these free trade agreements are very strict on what you can send back and forth. They've got very strict rules. So there's absolutely no concern on that level in terms of the quality of the product coming in from Canada into the European Union because of things like these trade agreements. That's exactly what they're for.
So everybody who is watching us and is from the business, I think Canada is the place to watch. Let's move into the Canadian political system. We don't know much about it as far as, you know, the political discussion in your country. We have here very, very polarized society and very tough sometimes discussions about political issues. What is really Canada like as far as political debate, the parties? What are the people passionate about?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question because we're not polarized in the same way as you described Poland, and certainly the United States right now is very polarized. It's not that we're immune to let's say populist or ideas, but in Canada the spectrum is not as wide in terms of left to right. So the two main governing parties that are traditionally in power, let's say there's a top three, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the NDP, they'd be the top parties. But right now it's a Liberal minority government. And but even if we were a Conservative minority government, the values are essentially very similar. So the debate right now is obviously dominated by COVID. I mean, that's just on everybody's top agenda. There's nothing else really. In Canada, we had an issue with vaccines because of the slowdown in production and shipment. And because we're buying all our vaccines from the European Union, this was a very big issue in Canada because of the slowdown of exports and this transparency mechanism that the European Union is talking about. That impacts countries like Canada, where all of our contracts are with European manufacturers. So I'd have to say that in Canada, everything is dominated by COVID, though. Of course, just like in every other country, the economy is important because of COVID. The economy is suffering. So any kind of economic stimulus or
And what
any
was the reaction of the government, of Canadian government? Did you go for a total lockdown for some weeks or months, or?
Canada has been very strict right from the beginning in terms of shutting down the border. We shut it down at the beginning of COVID and it stayed shut. So it's very hard to go to Canada. We've had a 2-week quarantine the whole time, and now we've gone into an even a more severe quarantine regime. The government of Canada really wants to get this resolved before they start opening the border again. So we don't have any sense when the quarantine and the border restrictions will be lifted. It's very tough.
So unfortunately, we cannot now think about going to Canada and traveling to Canada. What a pity. Hopefully, you know, it will be possible sometime later in this year. But tell me more, coming back to the political discussion. I know that now is COVID, but normally, before pandemic, you know, what were, or maybe they are still, what are the issues in the Canadian politics that politicians would focus?
I think for Canadians, probably, I'm speaking personally, but if I'm speculating, I would say that climate is huge because Canada is a resource-based economy in some parts of the country. At the same time, I think there's also a challenge for understanding what a green economy means, because there are more jobs in a green economy than people expect. It's actually an economy, an economic generator to be in the green tech environment. And in Canada, I think climate change is huge because we're a country, as I say, that we're a resource-based economy. So if we move away from, say, extraction of product from the ground, what do we do then? What do we do for jobs? What do we do for making sure that people have incomes? You know, it's a complicated conversation, but at the same time, Canadians recognize that there's a very serious situation in terms of the climate and the environment. So I'd say that's probably the top issue. But you know, we have very solid social programming, and that won't change, and so that doesn't really come to the top of political debate. You know, conversations about other country politics, engagement, who we're talking to, things like that come into play because we are such an immigrant country that what's happening around in the outside world is important to people. But people's interest in politics, I have to say, this is a personal observation, but it depends on where you are in Canada, how intensely interested people are in politics. So, you know, the quarantine politics have been huge because we're a federation. So provinces have jurisdiction and different provinces have made different decisions on quarantine, for example. And so these become hot topics of debate because people can't move between regions in Canada with quarantine. You can't travel to Eastern Canada without quarantining. So it's not like in Poland where you can go anywhere in the country, and it's just the same as being in Warsaw. In
Mhm.
Canada, you can't move between provinces without having to quarantine.
And tell us a little bit more about this aspect, because also, some people would not precisely know how Canada works as a country, as a federal state with an interesting history, actually. We've just some years ago, we celebrated 150 years of Canada. Can you tell us a little bit more about how when in the year are the most important moments when you celebrate your national day, and why? What are these, historical associations for Canadians important for you that you want
Well,
to?
Canada, as you mentioned, is a monarchy, and in the 1600s, the first North American or European settlers came to North America to where Canada became. There was Upper and Lower Canada, originally 4 provinces. In 1867, on July 1st, that's when Canada became an independent entity, and
But
that's
still
why.
connected with the British monarchy, with the
Yeah,
British
we still, the
crown.
Queen Elizabeth is the Queen of Canada, and she has a representative in Canada, which is called a Governor General. And the Governor General is largely a figurehead, but there are specific instances where the Governor General would play a role in making a decision about Parliament. She could ask, or he could ask, a leader to form a government if there's been a non-confidence vote, for example. But those powers are very limited. We're a monarchy. The Queen is our monarch, she's our queen. But it's a democratic country. But when you talk about our system, for example, healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction. So healthcare decisions, there are transfer payments. Canada, basically all provinces contribute to the big pot, and then the pot is divided based on need. So provinces that need more support from the federal government get it. Those who need it less pay more into the pot. But for things like healthcare, it's a provincial decision. So there is a meeting of provinces to talk about healthcare issues. But at the end of the day, so is education. These are provincial jurisdictions. So it's not one system across the country. These are dependent on where you live in terms of the curriculum, although they're similar, obviously. But
And it's also a bilingual country, French and English, despite the fact that most of the provinces, they are English-speaking people. It's Quebec, which is French. Could you a little bit tell us how it works in practice as far as public administration?
Every single Canadian public federal service has to be offered in French and English everywhere in Canada. So even if you're in the Yukon, you go into a federal government office, you have the right to expect to be served in French or English. And while we could say Quebec is a francophone province, New Brunswick is officially bilingual, French Canadian. There are big pockets of French Canadians in Manitoba. There are francophone populations all across Canada. So the French fact in Canada is right across our nation. And that reminds me of the Polonia in Canada, because I was surprised when I got to Poland to realize that there are Polish Canadians everywhere in Canada, and there are Polonia associations everywhere. Like c'est répandu, c'est partout. Hein? To be a Canadian diplomat, you have to be bilingual French English. And so we draw people from right across the country. Obviously, we want to represent our country abroad. And so, it's a bilingual country, and we're the better for it, I think.
And can you tell us a little bit more about your relationship as Canada as a state with France and with the UK as well? Because you have a queen, you share the queen with the UK as well. So does it, what does it mean in political?
Well, I don't think there's any particular, I mean, the UK is obviously the head of the Commonwealth. So Canada is a member of the Commonwealth, but beyond that, I mean, we're partners in multilateral, we're partners in NATO, and obviously with France, we're partners in the EU, but there's no relationship, I wouldn't say it goes beyond that. I mean, we have special historical ties, but Canada and France have a very strong bilateral relationship. But we're mostly partners with France in a more multilateral context. So as I say, we have a very big presence in France, a very big embassy with all kinds of interests. But with the UK, there are a lot of Canadians living in the UK, a lot of UK descendants living in Canada. So there are those family interpersonal ties, and obviously tradition. We have a lot of people whose family's tradition is British, same as French. But just on that point, in Quebec, obviously there's a lot of families that go back to a French lineage, but when you look at, there's a museum in Normandy in France that's called Les Muséales, and you'll see young men in the 1600s, 1603, 1604 went to Canada, and a lot of them didn't come back, and so their families died out in France, and their names like Mercier, Cloutier, Blais, these are names that don't exist in France anymore because the family died out in France, but is very robust in Quebec. So it's these movements of populations are interesting. And in Poland, with all the shifting borders over history, all kinds of intermixing here as well with local nationalities in the region.
And can you elaborate a little bit more about Commonwealth? How does this work in practice? Because for Polish people, it may be very abstract how this, space, this community of English-speaking countries works. It's 54 member states, I think, of Commonwealth.
Well, you know what? You might know better than me the number of members, but it's basically all of the former colonies, the former British colonies, who are still connected in a traditional sense. Like the Commonwealth is headed by the Queen, and there are regular conversations. And I think it's more of not a lobbying entity, but we would take a common position where possible on issues of mutual interest. It's yet another opportunity to have a conversation, not necessarily with like-minded, but to convince like-minded and others to take a position that we're all comfortable with as an organization.
We have a question from the audience, from Mr. Pavel Linke. It's about a difficult issue for Canadians, maybe the past and the relationship with Inuits, the native people. What is now the approach of the Canadian government to this, historical difficult past?
Yes, it's a good question. It is a difficult past, and there are lots of repercussions that are still with us today. The Canadian government under Trudeau and our current prime minister has been very clear about the desire of the Canadian government to make up for the past injustices that were imposed on our Aboriginal family. And there are the First Peoples are all over the country, and there are land claims underway, and obviously there are lingering effects of residential schools. It's a very complex history. There's no doubt about it. And Canada, it's not a shining moment in Canada's history for sure. But I would say that the government of Canada right now, I mean, it has over the years, of course, but there's a real priority on trying to make it better, to try to deal with issues. But there are lingering issues like water quality issues in some remote communities that have been lingering way too long. So you're right to point out that is an issue for the government and for the people. And as a Canadian, I find it just appalling, that some of these issues are still lingering around, to be honest.
You mentioned about also Polish people and people of Polish origin living in Canada. We have a question about Canadians and Poles. What do Canadians and Poles have in common, from your perspective? You know Poland already quite well.
What do Canadians and Poles have in common? I think we like good food. I'm kidding. Well, the Polish diaspora in Canada is a fairly old diaspora. Like there's not a ton of outward emigration from Poland now to Canada. There's some, but the bigger waves of immigration were 20 years ago and plus, and it's a more conservative Polish Canadian diaspora. So Poles in Canada, many of them have a very conservative view of things. They're more conservative than liberal. I mean, Polish, I don't know, like you're going to find such a variety of Polish people and such a variety of Canadians that it'd be pretty hard. What do we have in common? Like any other groups of people, we have things in common, things we disagree on, but individually, it's for me, what I find striking coming to Poland, obviously Poland is a very old country with a very long history. And I'm struck by the culture here. I'm struck by this even recent culture, like the poster graphic arts in Poland, exceptionally good, music, exceptionally high level. So I find the culture here, the quality of the arts is very, very, very important here in Poland. And I would say in Canada, we are fond of it as well, but we don't obviously have composers like Chopin, and we don't have that rich older history because we're such a young nation. But that's what I would say.
I must ask you about this at this point. How much would Canadians know about Poland actually? Because now being here, you can learn a lot while talking to people, reading books, meeting people, etc. But the Canadians, the average Canadian, how much would he or she know about this country?
Well, I think to be fair, people who read the media are probably getting their impression of Poland from what they're seeing in the media. So if you think about what the international press is writing about, that's probably what people's impression is, because people wouldn't have much knowledge of Poland today. I think that Canadians tend to think of Poland in terms of World War II, and they tend to think of it as being former communist, so many years under communism. I think people like, I'm talking about people who do not know Poland. I think that's your question. But someone like when I met Lech Walesa, it was such a thrill. He's an iconic person, and Poland rose like a phoenix from communism with no bloodshed. Everybody knows this about Poland. Like it, so those are iconic moments in history, world history. And those are moments that everybody knows. And so things, famous things from the war, partition, you know, the kings of Poland, the history, I think people generally know those things. But I think if you're talking to the average person today about Poland today, and I said this to the mayor of Warsaw, that I'm one of the best fans of Poland in terms of promoting. I've been cycling and hiking all over this country. I've had great food everywhere, great, you know, great conversations. I've met great people. Like, and I said to him, it's funny, so many people come to Warsaw and they're like, whoa, this is such a cosmopolitan modern city. You know, I wasn't expecting it. And so I said to him, I'm one of your, we as diplomats posted here, we're some of the biggest fans.
Listening to you, I have an impression that once you are back to your country, you will be the best ambassador of Poland to Canada.
Well, it's like so many, like when I meet former Polish ambassadors to Canada, they're like, oh boy, we love Canada. And it's because we go abroad. We love being abroad. We're all adventurers at heart, or we wouldn't be in the foreign service. So by being here, I know I'm here for a limited amount of time. So every diplomat who makes a decision to go abroad, you know, you've got to take advantage. Whereas if you live in a place, you don't travel as much around your
Right.
own country, probably.
So you mentioned that, but we have one more question about the impression. That what was the most surprising for you when you came to Poland? Because this was your first time you came to Poland ever, right?
Yes.
So what was the most?
Well, I'll tell you something funny. I don't know, you guys are going to find this funny, but I was surprised how unfriendly people were on the street.
Oh,
Like when you're walking down the street at home, people smile. It's just more. And here, people, I'll be smile. Oh, hello. I'll smile. Hello. People are like, and I asked around. I said, "Why is that?" And they said, "Ah, it's the history. It's people. There's a leftover of communism." People said to me, "We're older people. They're not really sure who the weirdo is saying hi to them when they don't know them." And it's something I noticed, and then it went away. And I must say I don't feel it anymore. But many people I've spoken to who, as foreigners, come here have noticed the exact same thing. There's a reserve in people when you
mm,
don't know them. And I mean older people, and I don't think it applies so much to younger people. But I guess coming here, it's a very rich. I mean, like I say, the bicycling infrastructure was probably the first thing that caught my attention, because Warsaw, last time I checked, had 580 kilometers of bike paths. Ottawa, where I come from, has 980 kilometers of bike paths, because we have a very big green belt around the city. But I was astonished by, I bike everywhere. I just think the biking here is great, and I didn't expect that.
mm. Well, I would like to finish our talk with a serious note, because that's one more thing we should really discuss. It's security aspect, because we have Canada is a NATO country, first of all. Then we have Canadian soldiers here in Central Eastern Europe. So taking into consideration, it's a very, very important issue for Poland and for Central Eastern European countries. Could you a little bit elaborate on that?
Canada and Poland are the best of friends, completely aligned on security issues. So Canada, Poland, on Belarus, on Ukraine, on security challenges in the region, completely aligned. Yes, we're in NATO. Poland's in NATO. Polish troops are serving under Canada Command in Latvia as part of the Enduring Foreign Freedom. So yes, it's a very, the security relationship between Canada and Poland is huge. And of course, NATO is a big organization. So this brings together a lot of nations who also have an interest in the security in this part of Europe. But yeah, it's a very tight relationship. I'm not sure what else to say there, but we have troops in 4 different places in Poland. And up to 2017, we had over 1,000 troops here as part of Operation Forward Presence. Is it EFP, Operation Forward Presence, I think?
That's right. Well, it's always, important to stress that it's not only the US, but also Canada is with us. We appreciate it. Thank you very much for this talk. It was lovely, really, to have you in the morning and to have coffee with you. That's the only way we can really now meet in a larger group until COVID is over, which will not be very soon, unfortunately. Thank you very much. Thank you for all those who are watching us. Mrs. Leslie Scanlon, the Ambassador of Canada, Your Excellency, thank you very much for this talk. And for all the other people, please join us every first morning Friday of the month. We do these talks with different countries and different ambassadors. See you next time.
Great to see you. Bye.